Hey, everybody. All right, just cutting off Walter. Sorry, Walter, as always. How's everybody doing today? Thanks for joining me, as always. Super psyched to be here on definitely November in New York now. Feels that way. Heat's on, hands are cold, you know, all those things. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm just getting my windows sorted here. Everybody. All right, so first up, thanks, Beavy, for being here as always. My chair getting stuck on a cable. I want to let you know I've got a new course out. Some of you guys already have it. It's a new take on a course. It's a bit of it's like a mini course, or it's like a workshop. So it's about a little over an hour long, and it's about playing the changes on a blues in one position. Some of you guys already have it, and I appreciate that. And it's 75% off, so that puts it in around the $10 range, maybe. So lots of information, but I thought I'd give it a different offering, you know, because the courses I think sometimes can be a little overwhelming for people. Like, oh man, there's all this stuff in here. I got to learn this solo and all that. So this is more about like what you would get if you took a lesson with me or we did a master class. And yeah, so I hope you guys checked it out. The feedback's been really good. So for all you people who've already picked it up, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. You can get some other stuff going on, talking about the that thing right there, which I'm playing to right now. But let's talk about playing better blues. And the way of playing better blues, I want to talk a little bit about what I'm pushing in that course. One thing that I've discovered that was the idea of playing on the changes or playing over the changes. So playing over the changes would be like a G minor pentatonic scale over a G blues. You know, kind of, which is great. And, you know, lots of guys have made really great careers off of that. And that's cool. But after a while, there's many other things that you can do that isn't always that. You know, you could start to outline the chord changes, and I've talked about this before. And when you want, that's playing on the changes. That's addressing the chord changes as they go by. And that's a really important thing to be able to do because it makes everything much more interesting. I do get a little tired of straight minor pentatonic if somebody's just kind of playing that, no matter who it is, no matter how great they are at it. After a little while, I want to start to hear something else. So all my favorite players really do mix in outlining the chord changes to a greater or lesser degree. So let's say like Stevie Ray, a little bit of a lesser degree. That was more stylistic, because when you hear him play sometimes other stuff, he could do it, of course. B.B. King's a little bit more on the chord changes. And so basically what happens when you start to get a little bit onto the chord changes, it starts to sound maybe a little jazzier and a little less traditional. So if you're getting into the territory of, say, like Robin Ford or like Matt Schofield or Larry Carlton playing blues, something that's a little bit more outlining changes and then also maybe putting other changes in there that are not there. But the biggest problem I had was I was always really intimidated by the idea of playing over chord changes. You know, I thought it was terrifyingly difficult to do. And the cool thing is, it's not. It's actually, I don't want to say it's easy. Nothing on guitar is easy. Come on. But it's not as difficult as I had thought it was once I kind of thought about what I'm going to talk about today and what the course is largely about. First thing you want to do whenever you want to tackle something, you just want to do it in one position because it gets really overwhelming. I want to learn how to play over these 3 chords of a G blues in one position or all across the fingerboard. Well, that's going to get in your way because it's just way too much info. So the first thing I would think about when I'm playing over a G blues, and some of this is from the chorus, but you know, I would love it if you picked up the chorus, is if you could think about the roots. If we're thinking the first chords, the first scale we usually end up using is like a G blues scale on a G blues, right? Or a G minor pentatonic, something like that. So that's cool, but we're missing a bunch of cool things. But in there, what I found a lot of people don't do at first, myself included for a very long period of time, was to outline the chord changes even just using the pentatonic scale, if that makes sense. Because so each of the notes of the chords, some of the notes of the chords are in the pentatonic scale. Not all of them, but some of them are. Well, let me just change my camera a little bit here. Lower that down. Wait, hold on. There you go. Yeah, well, that's a little better. Okay, cool. All right, so what I mean is G minor pentatonic spelled G, B flat, C, D, F. G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat. So I'm playing that over the G7 chord. But if I look at a G7 chord, I have G, B, D, F. But I've got a number of those notes. I have this G, I have a D, I have the F. I don't have the B, I got a B flat, but I can bend it, the root as well. So when I go to my C7 chord, which is C, E, G, B flat, I have some really cool notes there. The G, which is the root of the 1 chord, probably what we end up playing a lot, but this B flat is the flatted 7th, and the C is the root. Okay, so these 2 notes are great, and when I first started digging into the blues, I wouldn't play those specifically at the time on the C chord. I'll show you in a minute. And also when we go to our D7 chord, D7 is spelled D, F sharp, A, and C. So there's some notes that aren't in there, but we have a D, and we have a C. So we have the C to D, B flat, C. So I'm just going to focus on those notes at the right time. So I'm going to have this G on the G chord, this B flat on the C chord, or the C on the C chord. And when I go to my D chord, I'm going to play the C and the D. Let's check it out. So just notes from pentatonic scale, but let's hear how it sounds. Blues, right? my B flat on that C chord. It's right there. Play that E. I'm sorry, the D. The fifth of the chord, right? It's right in there, chord there. Now I'm going to go to that C again. Here comes my D, the flat 7. Same move, watch. There's my D. So, do you see what was going on? Was that mix okay? Well, sometimes it's hard for me to tell. So, on my G chord, I was thinking of notes from the chord, right? So, these G7, I'm going to get that F, the G, the F, the D, and then the G, again, it'll sound great. And when I go to the C7 chord, C, E, G, B flat, I'm going to focus on some of the notes that are from the C7 chord as they go by on the C7 chord. But they're still from the pentatonic scale, so I'm playing the C and the B flat. And that sounds really cool because I'm going to this 4 chord. Right? Then. Did you hear the chord changes? I'm going to, hold on. It mix is good. Thanks, BB. Awesome. Thanks. So, did you hear the chord changes? I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Hold on. Now I'm going to play the blues, and I'm only going to play the chord tones that are contained in the chords that are in the pentatonic scale, all right? So check it out. So here's my 1 chord. Watch. Here comes my 5 chord. You hear it? Watch. So by just using the pentatonic scale and thinking about the chords as they go by, I made the chord changes. I don't know about you guys, but for many years I didn't do that. I would just play lots of G's, right? You're playing blues licks, you had some licks together, like G, 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 you know, even on that 4 chord, which is cool, and a 5 chord, you start hitting that G a lot because it's the root of the G blues. Nothing wrong with that note, but it can get a little boring for me when I hear players bang that root a lot. I find it to be a little dull, especially since you don't have to do that if you just kind of think a little bit. And so where is this all coming from? So the premise of the course and anything for me was I'm thinking less scale now. I am thinking pentatonic, yes. But I'm also starting to see the chord shape as it exists in that one position. So if I'm playing a G7 chord, I've got, well, what notes are in the scale? Okay, well, I've got the G, the F, the D. Okay, I don't have the B, we can get to that. But I have the G and the F. So I have the number of notes in the G minor pentatonic scale that are contained in the G7 chord. All right? So now when I go to the C7 chord, well, there's a bunch in there, but if I just see the chord shape, and I'm still sticking to the pentatonic scale, but okay, the C and the B flat and the G. So when I started seeing that, like I'm going to just target the notes that are not the most common, which would be, I'm not going to target the root of the G chord because that's the most common thing to do. I'm going to focus in on getting that C and the B flat. right? So one thing I discovered when I started digging into this is like really obvious stuff once you do it, and you're like, wow, I should have known that, is bending from this flat 7 up to the root of the 4 chord. My 5, 4, the flat 7 to the root on the 1. That was one of those moments where I was like, oh God, how come I haven't been doing this for years? It's so obvious. And the reason why I wasn't doing it was because I didn't see C7 or C major with the 7. I didn't see the chord. I was thinking pentatonic scale, blues licks, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. If I backtrack for a minute, none of this other stuff will sound really good until you have those G minor pentatonic sort of vocabulary sort of rolling. If you don't have some handle on that, stop everything and go back and do that. I'm still working on that stuff. I don't mean to perfect it and have it, you hear B.B. King play, in 1962, and I'm like, oh God, we got so much way to go. It's so great. So what I'm getting at is that stuff, working on just playing a blues well with the pentatonic scale, is never over. There's all the nuances and subtleties and all those beautiful things that you can think about, phrasing and tone and dynamics and all that stuff. But once you feel like you're getting kind of bored of the pentatonic scale, I think it's like a famous quote, I can't remember who said it, of course, but it's like, if you're bored, you're not paying attention. And that's really kind of cool. So if you're bored with the pentatonic scale, you've not really mined everything, because there's all sorts of ways you can start to see it. I mean, harmonically, yeah, after a while, you'll be like, I want to expand out. But there's still, every time I look at the pentatonic scale, there's always something I can kind of get out of it that I might not have done before, or just perfect what I have done before. So once again, when I'm on my 4 chord, I'm going to concentrate on the notes of the C7 chord. And the best way to do that, if you're not really clear of what your C7 chord is or what the notes are, definitely write it out on a piece of paper. That's for sure, because then you can look down at it and all that. But look at the chord shape. So if I see this chord shape, I can play any of those notes. An old Peter Green at B.B. King lick. Right off the C7 chord and back to the G7. Up to my D. So if I start to see the chord shape in any position, and of course I'm just doing this position right here. And the reason for that is once you start to get some of the ideas in one position and really nail them, when you go to your next position on the fingerboard, your ears are much more in tune with these things. You can also use some of the same exact fingering. So if you figure out something over here on G7, when you go up to here for C7, you already have it covered, right? So you've got that same experience, because guitar can be very kind of picture-oriented. So what's the fun thing about seeing the chord shapes inside in the position that you're playing in is you're starting really to play arpeggios and targeting chord tones, but it's a little bit an easier way to get to it, because sometimes, the learning all your arpeggios is very daunting, and I think it's something you should do. And don't forget, guys, I've got the Arpeggios Unlocked free mini course and ebook that you guys can get. It's in a link down below if you want to start to dig into the arpeggios, which you should at some point. But if you just play the notes of a G7 chord individually, yeah. Sorry, went. Let's play those notes individually. I messed that up. I'll try it again. That's sort of a bit of like a broken arpeggio if I started in the G. But so just by playing the chord shape of G7, I can play this G7, or I can play that. I played a really cool line on a G7 chord. Oops, there's my C7 chord. I'm on my 5 chord, D7. So by very simply just seeing this G7 chord, C7, and D7, and just playing the notes of that chord, I nailed all the chord changes. I didn't really necessarily need to know immediately that D7 is D, F sharp, A, and C, where all those notes are. I just played the chord, right? To my C7. Now, if you go up and down the chords each time, that's going to get a bit dull too, but it's a great place to start. And I say a lot of times, when you're practicing here, you're not performing. You'll work out how to do it when you're playing, but this is where you're practicing. So visualizing the chord in the position is really, really, really important. And that was what's great about this concept is in any chord that you come across, the same thing holds true. So if I'm going to play, I was talking to my inner circle guys last night, so like a G7 flat 9 flat 13. What? So that would take a G altered scale, which is the 7th degree of a melodic minor scale. Or if you're not really comfortable with that, you can just play the chord and resolve it to where you're going to say C minor. So I'm playing a G7 flat 9 flat 13 arpeggio. I'm playing an altered scale. I am playing the notes of the G7 flat 9 flat 13, a mode of melodic minor, super low cream, whatever you want to call it. But if I just play the chord shape, I've got it covered. So in any situation, I feel like now, if I know the chord, and there's lots of things I'm not really great at soloing over, like bebop, but I can make it through these chord changes because I know the notes and the chords. But if something comes across that I'm really kind of worried about, just play the chord and I'm good to go. It won't necessarily be, it's not going to sound like Wes Montgomery. I don't have the vocabulary. I don't spend my whole lifetime learning bebop, and that's a whole other. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just having the confidence to play through changes. And one thing is, like, I'm a rock guitar player with a fusion jazzy background. I can play through chord changes. But I don't play jazz. So, and one of the ways I learned to finally play through chord changes was to tackle anything I'm doing in one position, and then also to envision the chord shape as it exists in the position you're in. And then for me, always a surrounding scale, especially playing blues, is a pentatonic scale. Because it always sounds good. It's home base. It's the best. It's the coolest sound. But by just adding or changing a note from the chord, or this adding or changing a note from the scale to match the fingering of the chord, it gives you the proper notes. Now, do you need to know further on down the line that if I'm playing the G7 chord, I'm ultimately playing like G mixed Lydian, then I'm going to go to C mixed Lydian, D mixed Lydian? No. You want to know that at some point, but at first, once again, that's way too much information. It really bogs you down. But if you're playing the chord shapes and thinking about those, you are actually covering those scales and using the chords, the note. Okay, so let me get this right. The different notes of the chord, and if you play those, actually creates the scale, if that makes sense. So the difference between G mixed Lydian, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and C mixed Lydian, C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat is a B and a B flat. Well, my chord progression, my chord just told me that. There is a B on my G7 chord, and I go to C7, there's a B flat. How about my D chord? So by those three notes, I covered the whole blues. So by playing those three notes, I'm killing the chord changes. All right, so is this making sense, everyone? So let's take a look. Well, let me see if there's any questions that you have that would help answer any of the. Well, let me see if you have any questions. See if you remotely political posts. Can we just not, please? Okay, I just don't want to do. I just don't want that here. We could leave that off the page. Okay. So if I'm thinking this G7, though, think about it. And then you went there, I used a chromatic note. Well, that's from the blues scale. And you start to hear those things as you do it. So you also hopefully want to see, like, let your ears do its thing, like mess around. Be prepared to hit bad notes. Who cares? Because you're practicing. So there, I went like this, right? On my 5 chord. Well, just mess around. And if you hear something, you're like, whoa, what was that? Hold everything and go back and try to work it out and sound it out. And you'd be really glad you did. Okay, so let me see if you got any questions. And then I can talk about gear and stuff. The big stuff. All right. Okay, so Mike Jones, I see the notes of the chord are your scale, basically. Scales, I should say. Absolutely. So that's an interesting kind of concept. I've had a lot of discussions with my friends over the years. When I grew up, my formative guitar years, which hopefully they still are, but the 80s, right? So that was the advent of all the shreddy stuff, and that was all the guitar magazines coming in full force, which is what it was such a great time to grow up as a guitar player. Amazing stuff. But everything was very scale oriented, this scale or that scale. And I went to Berkeley, and though it's a great school, it's also very scale oriented in the way they approach how to explain these things. So when I started to break away from that and realize that most jazz musicians I know who are really great improvisers don't think about scales. They think about chord tones and how they can embellish those chord tones from the scale. Now, they know why it exists. Okay, this scale, C7 would take a C Mixolydian scale because it's a major chord with a flat 7. Mixolydian scale is a major scale with a flat 7. Great. But if you're thinking Mixolydian, you're going to play ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba. You're like, I didn't sing that flat 7 right. And you're going to be like, okay, you got a scale. Okay, cool. Now, how do I play that? It's when I started seeing the chords as they exist, and the chord, as you were saying right there, very succinctly, it's the chord that defines the scale. Now, the most obvious explanation or example of that is if I play, like an E major chord, and I play, or if I play a C note. Why does the C sound bad? It sounds bad because of the chord I'm playing it against, right? So it's the kind of like the backdrop is the chord, and the notes that you play on top of it is going to be, it's the backdrop. I think I'm mixing metaphors and being terrible here. The chord defines the way the scale is going to sound. So if you hit a wrong note, what makes it sound like the wrong note is the chord that you played it over. So when you have a C7 chord, right, what'll define what notes you play is the actual chord, and define what scale as well. Hopefully that will make sense. All right. Okay, we got some other stuff. How do you always know where your phrases are going to finish on each chord? Okay, another great question. What this starts to do, and the reason in the course I chose a very slow blues, I chose this blues, to give you plenty of time. I also said try to do this away from the blues, the background track, because that can be a little bit much as well. You're really starting to think about it. Now, I will try to, one great way to do it is to start to think about hitting a chord tone on the downbeat of the next chord, right? So if I've got my G7, right? Right, so sometimes being really that obvious, and hitting the downbeat. The skill that this requires you to have is that you know when the chord's coming, and like kind of innately, like you can listen to the changes, think about improvising, and know when the chord's coming. So that's actually one of the most difficult things. And when I've taught a lot of workshops, I kind of do a round robin where everybody takes a solo. And I say, okay, hit the chord tone on the downbeat. And everybody's like, yeah, I got it. And inevitably about the third guy, it just falls apart because they lost track of where the chord was. Like, what chord are we on now? Oh man, I just lost track. So that's actually one of the more difficult things to do. So a cool thing you do is put on a song, any blues tune, and just follow along with the changes and just pat them in your head. Okay, there's my 1 chord, there's my 4 chord, there's my 1, there's my 5. So you hear them. So, right? So, right? Siren. So here's my 1. Four. It's no longer the ice cream truck, it's a siren now. Right? So I can hear this as they go by, and I can anticipate the chord before it comes, so I'm really thinking ahead. It does take some work. I found that to be the most tricky thing at first, knowing what chord you're on when, you know? Okay. When you target a note, do you typically do that by ending a phrase on that note? Yeah, for sure. And the phrase is cool. I'm glad you used the term phrase. Sometimes it won't end on a downbeat. Sometimes I'll have the phrase and it ends on an upbeat, right? So 3 and 4 and like that's off. Like, and then sometimes if I have enough phrases that end on an upbeat, I might end one on a downbeat to kind of give a really stronger sense of resolution. One thing that's really been cool is to not start the phrase on a downbeat. Start the phrase on an upbeat. So 1, but that's instantly a way to make you sound better, is to start a phrase on an upbeat. So like 1. And 1. Right? So you think 1, so always 1 and the and of 1 or the second 16th note really works great to think about a different way to phrase. Just like anything, if you do anything too much, it starts to lose its interest or effect. If I start everything on a downbeat, that's boring. If I end everything on a downbeat, that's boring. If I start everything on an upbeat, still sounds pretty cool. But if I end everything on an upbeat, it's the mixture of those things. The other thing I would think about too as you're doing this is when you learn somebody else's solo, which I think is really important to do. Pick something that you can play. Don't try to play, I'm going to learn this crazy freaking solo that's 4 choruses long, and I'm going to learn just a nice simple solo. One I always recommend, it's in a few of my courses in the past, is like Strange Brew solo by Cream. First solo and a second solo. It's an Albert King solo they stole. But it's perfect. I think it's a solo from Crosscut Saw. You guys can help me with that. So it's really important that you just learn some of those classic solos and just think about, oh, he started that on upbeat and he ended that on a downbeat. Oh, he's playing a chord tone there. And then learn the solo note for no other reason to educate yourself and get the phrasing and work on the vibrato and all that. Not so much like, hey, check me out, I can play the solo to Crossroads, which is great. I mean, I knew how to play it at one point and I've kind of forgotten how to play it because I probably never learned it 100% properly. But then I would go back and the things I learned from that solo, and when I go back and revisit it, I still hear new and cool things. And he was like 24 on that jerk. So, okay. The sirens somehow fit, don't they? Right. Okay, so Jeff Motter. So if you want to create a bit of tension, would you throw in a major third and bend into the chord notes, basically how to create tension? Yeah. The cool thing about, if you know where the chord tones are, you can approach those notes from any other note that surrounds it, right? So let's take a perfect example. So if I have this G7 and I go to C7, and I have an E, right? So the F and E. So maybe I could go in my G7 chord. Right? And then get that as a bend. Also, what I talk about in the course is I could bend to, like you mentioned, the natural third. Right? right? So you can think about taking any note that you want. You can bend to it from a whole step. You can bend to it from a chord tone, or a scale tone, or you can approach it from a half step below. There's all sorts of ways you can do it. But the coolest thing to add some of that tension is going to be, you have your target note. And once you're really firm with that, adding the tension becomes a little bit easier to do. And we're not talking about things that further down the line that people call approach notes, or they call them enclosures now. I was brought up as approach notes. And if you want to hear what I'm talking about that, Mike Stern did an interview with Wick Beato. Go check that out. It kind of goes into depth on that. I studied with Mike for a little bit. Some other teachers who gave me this sort of approach note official pattern. But once you start to know the chord shapes and the tones, I say chord shapes as a starter. You want to know the notes. You want to know the fingerboard. You want to know the theory, blah, 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 blah. Yes, of course. But that's really hard. It's a lot of work it's not hard to understand it on paper eventually, right? You know, I can figure out, I just memorize the spelling of chords. That's not too difficult. The application across the fingerboard is extremely difficult. So that's what you got to be careful of. So what I'm getting at is the reason why I say just learn the chord shapes is just to begin with, to get you into it and get some of the fear away of making chord changes. It's just time. But if you see the chord shape, it really, really helps. And I can target any of those chord shapes from any note around it and know that my resolution point is going to be really strong. Oh, S.E. Nesbitt, recording scales. My son taught modes. I taught my son modes when he was 12, 13 years old. It's taken him years to recover. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, the modes they're just a thing. Like they're important, of course. They're extremely important, but they're not everything. People sometimes think the scales are everything. It's a combo of all of this stuff, and they all are so intertwined. But I knew scales really well, but I didn't understand chords or chord tones and why they were ultimately, in my mind, more important for my playing, for sure. Stan Stamos. What's up, Sam? Sam Stamos. Just during the stream, when you say upbeat, downbeat, are you referring to certain beats in the measure, or is it an upbeat kind of offbeat? I'm putting a certain beat, so if I'm thinking about like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3. So an upbeat, I'm usually just the main easiest one if you're thinking eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3. I'll start the lick on the second. I'll start on the upbeat. So instead of going ba 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 ba, I'll go ba 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 ba. Right? So the lick, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right? So I took the same exact lick, but one started on a downbeat and one started on the offbeat. By starting on the offbeat, you give it a really great sense of forward motion that you don't always get starting on a downbeat. Let's check it out. And 1. I'm going to start on a downbeat here. So I'm going to start on the upbeat, watch. And most blues players who are my favorites are usually going to favor starting on an upbeat. When you hit that downbeat, I mean, like Albert King will do that whole, no, Albert Collins, that whole kind of like pounding that one, da, da, and that's really effective because it's like getting punched in the face in the best way, if there is a best way. And then the offbeat is that really cool, a little bit slicker. And Albert Collins would not always start on downbeat. I'm just giving a blunt example of hitting all those downbeats can have a certain sound, but that starting on that up. Now it could be the end of 1, it could be the end of 3, it could be the end of anything. And the easiest way I've found to get that into your playing is to do something like this. Like so. Like do like a fake downstroke. You can sound it. So by just kind of getting that fake downstroke, you're starting on that upbeat. And I found that was a cool way to just start to build that into your playing, or to experiment as to how to get that into your playing. Now, in the course, I talk about the pentatonic scales. I talk about outlining all of those 3 chords, approach notes to those, ways to practice it, soloing with the chord tones, mixing major, minor, pentatonic. And I put it in sequential order. Start with this. Okay, got that. We're going to go to that. And I'm going to do this, that. So I think if you guys are digging this conversation, I would love it if you picked up the course. It's 75% off. And it's really pretty inexpensive and a lot of good info, over an hour of stuff. And once again, you can also check out, as I suggest in the course too, we want to dig deeper, just go over to the Arpeggios Unlocked free ebook and mini course. Because ultimately that's where this all kind of gets to, is that we're learning arpeggios, but to the back door. All right. So let's see. Any more questions? All right, a lot of people here. Questions? Come on. Let's talk about some stuff. So yeah, this is the finalized prototype of the Jeff McErlane signature Tuttle guitar. And I got the new neck back. So this is an 860 thickness, and which is to my liking. It's a nice medium, large, who knows, but it's all relative, to like 860 for me. It's great. I think it's a little bit thicker, a little bit more vintage feeling. As opposed to the original neck was a little thinner, but I just got it back and I absolutely love it. So we're ready to go on this. And it is Lake Placid blue. And it's got, these are actually Ron Ellis pickups in the moment. We're going to use Michael's pickups, which are fantastic. I was just going through different ones. And right now I have 9.5s on this. I usually play 10s. I've had some, as we talked about to you guys, for a little bit of a problem with this finger, with like some early arthritis that I'm just trying to get ahead of and not get worse. So I'm experimenting with string gauges. When I was on the road, I put on 9s, and then like the second gig, I'm like, I gotta get these off my guitar. So live, I think I'm gonna probably lean towards 10s and things. So it would go out with 10s on it, because that's usually what I use. 6105 frets. It's gonna be maple rosewood, and this is alder. And what we've done is the guitars are all kind of, into the special run, they will be lighter, like that. I specified the lighter bodies. So this guitar itself is about 7 pounds, maybe just 7 pounds. So it's really, really light. At the moment, we're doing it only in this color because we're going to run a few of them at a time. It's easier for Michael to do that. And I want to talk about the guitars and what he does. Everything is handmade or made for him. The only thing that is not custom made for him really is the tuning heads. He chooses the wood, cuts the bodies. He has a CNC machine, but he finishes everything by hand, paints it himself. It's lightweight, super thin nitro. As you can see when I had it on the road, it's already kind of chipping. I had him crack the finish a little bit because I think it looked cool. There's no fake wear on it other than a finish crack, that's all. And then same thing right here. The headstock, I had them tint it, and we got this gold logo. We're gonna have my little signature on the back. We got to get that printed up after we decided on this. And I also had him remove the finish from here to there. So it's an oil finish, so it feels like, my old Charvels, and the way I like all my guitars to feel, like my old Strat, all the finish is off of it. So it's an oil finish. And rosewood board, and we are specifying the dark rosewood, so it's going to be kind of the premium stuff. He's pretty picky about that as well. He understands that people like the aesthetic, so just some dark rosewood is the darkest ones that he has. If you are interested in getting one of the guitars, Michael doesn't have a lot of dealers, so there's basically going to be two places we can go through Michael directly. Or there's this great store called Sound Pure, and my friend Eddie Berman, who's been around for a really long time. Great dude. If you're interested in one of the guitars, right now you can reach Eddie at Soundpure, Eddie@soundpure.com, and you can talk about the guitar. We're going to offer it with 2 neck dimensions, and that was just because I like a bit of a larger neck. And we wanted to let people have an 830 neck, which is, you're kind of like a Sir thickness neck. A lot of people really like that. And this is an 860, which is a bit bigger. So we're just going to offer the 2 different neck shapes because Because I know that's a big deal. Somebody be like, I want everything about the guitar, but I want a thinner neck or I want a bigger neck. Michael Cope, thanks so much. 7 1/4 radius. All right, so let me talk about this for a minute. Thanks, Michael, for bringing that up. 7 1/4. I got so used to playing my vintage guitars that I got really into 7 1/4 radius. The reason why I also teamed up with Michael, because he's my friend and I've been working with him forever, is when I let people play this, they can't believe it's 7 1/4 because it feels flatter because his fretwork is so good and the temperament of the fingerboard. You know, it's 7 1/4. It's perfect. I've had people work on my guitars and be like, wow, this is crazy. This guy does an amazing job. So the action is fairly low, like low for me. It's low. From my friend was just here. He's like, man, this is way too low for me. So the action's low. It doesn't fret out. But it still has that vintagey feel that I do really like. Now, I think you can get used to anything like, you know, if you have a 10-inch radius in your guitar, like that black Tuttle I have over there, that's a 10-inch radius. I like that after a while. But ultimately, I just kind of lean towards the 7 1/4 from having the vintage Strat and that kind of being the main guitar for a long time. Now, there is a lunacy that people will discuss that I'm not the only person who's brought it up, that I believe, and this is like going to go into the Tonewood thing, that 7 1/4 sounds a little different than a flatter radius. Could be the angle of the string across the pickups. Michael said to me, he's like, do you notice that it sounds different than a flatter radius? I said, absolutely I do. I thought I was just being crazy. My friend Matt Brewster at 30th Street Guitars, who does everybody's guitars, he's like, oh yeah, 7 1/4 sounds different than 10 or 12. Could be psychosomatic. It feels that way to me. Okay, so everybody's going to be like, you guys are crazy, but that's kind of the way I feel like it. Other really cool things, push-in bar. So it's a vintage tremolo with the push-in bar, and you got a set screw back there so I can make how tight I want the bar to be. That's really huge to me because being a Strat player, I'm always liking a 6-screw bridge, which I do. So it's the same material as a Fender bridge. So it's not steel. It's your regular Fender bridge material. 6-screw, I like the sound and feel of those because I'm just used to them. But all the hassles you get when you're playing a Strat, you have to put that little spring in there, and then you got to put that tape around it, and blah blah blah. It gets annoying after a while. I do it with all my Strats. There's videos on how to do it, but you know, it stays in tune great, and also that bar doesn't have any slop in it, so it's easier to deal with. So yeah, we're launching it. If you guys want to take, if you guys are interested in one, definitely contact Eddie. Don't forget it's going to be like Fender Custom Shop kind of price range. It's a handmade guitar, so it's a premium guitar. It's not throwing that out there because that's what it is. And I'm not just saying this. There's a bunch of guitars now that I'm going to put on a chopping block for me because this is great. It's plays like a vintage instrument, plays kind of better. It's not a vintage guitar, so I can go to Europe and I can do all these things and not run around with a vintage guitar. And I think there's less hassles. In what way does it sound different? What way does the 7 1/4 sound different? It always sounds more Stratty to me. It always sounds a bit more vintage to me. I'm not saying a flatter radius doesn't sound good. It does, but it just sounds just different to me when you're playing. It just sounds more like my vintage Strat. That's what I mean. It just has more of a vintage vibe to it. I don't know what that is. People can say I'm crazy, like I said, but Also, other things people say you're crazy, but it's totally true. We put a different neck on and the guitar sounds different. They both sounded great, but they'd sound a little different. Same body, just a different neck. So I'm like, wow, the guitar sounds a little different. So that's all just these things that just happen. 6105 frets. Yes, that's what's on here. And I got to say that Michael does the best fret work that I've personally encountered. Obviously I'm hawking a guitar, but I think you guys know me well enough that I'm not going to put my name on it, but I didn't think it was as good as I think it is, All right, anyway. Okay, so that's this, and that's the guitar. If you want to reach out, you can, like I said, reach over at Eddie at Soundpure. You can start talking to him about it. If you want to reach out to me, I can direct you to the right people too, and you can meet me at to my website and the contact thing, just jeffmcrelane.com. Hit contact and drop me a line. Okay. So the other thing that people want to know about is the Jakey Lee Friedman amp. Yeah. Okay. Why did I get that? Because it sounds freaking awesome, and I love. Well, I've always been a Jakey Lee nut, kind of growing up, and Ozzy, but with my hold, it will have your signature on it. Yes, it will. I just have to. This is the prototype that's done. We're gonna have a little signature on the back. Oh, totally ridiculous that I forgot to mention this. And Michael said, sneak peek on this thing too. We're doing also a Nashville telly. Right? Okay, so humbuck, it's going to be Nashville Telecaster. So I'm going to have a maple neck on that. It's going to be ash. It's going to have 2 Strat pickups and a telly pickup. Because why not? And that'll be cool. So that's coming up too. So we're just doing a run of 2 different guitars and see what people like. Because I always really wanted a telly that I would like, but I love things about Strats. So a Nashville style telly is coming up too. Okay. Oh yeah, Kirk Schaffenberg. The tone on bends and vibrato sound different in 7 1/4. I notice it between my Strats and telly, which are 9.5. Yes. Right? The vibrato, the feel is definitely when I vibrato, I feel it differently. But yeah, the tone and the feel of it, I agree with you. So you're right. Yeah. It's cool to see you with a Tuttle under your fingers again. Early days of True Fire, you always had a Tuttle. Yeah, I've been working with Michael forever, and I love it. So the only reason why I kind of stopped, I just got a vintage Strat and I started playing that all the time. And then, which is great. And then Michael's like, well, why don't we just do something together, like a signature, and we'll kind of design it around all the things you like about my guitars and vintage guitars. What I also love about Michael's guitars is they feel this feels really vintage, yet with a bit more playability, if that works. You know what I'm saying? Like, because my old Strat's great, but it plays great, and my friend Holger does an amazing fret job. It just doesn't play like this, and I miss some of those elements of when I was into playing Jacksons and Charvels, or even my PRSs, which I love, and they play so beautifully, and it's what I wanted to have in this. All right, so let's talk about the amp for a minute. I grew up being a rock guy. What color is the telly? Shoreline Gold, tortoise guard. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's going to have a maple neck, but it's going to have a tint to it, so it doesn't look like a white maple. It's going to look a vintage vibe to it. And that should hopefully be in my hands in a few weeks. You guys will know about that. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to offer to you, and I'm super psyched about that, to have a telly that I want to. Kind of always wanted one. People always were like, "Oh, play a telly," and I just didn't usually. One last. Okay, I think that's it for the guitars for right now. Okay, so the Jakey Lee amp. I grew up playing Marshalls my whole life, and you guys see I have the Super Lead, as you know, which is great. But the Super Lead is a big pain in the butt. Sounds great. I own it, so I'm not going to get rid of it because I'll never replace it. And I got it inexpensively when nobody wanted them, and nobody wants them now anyway because they're too big and they're too loud and they're too heavy. So what I'm going to put, sorry, I got distracted by the comments. I got to cover the comments because my eye looks to them and I'll say something that's in the comments. It's kind of funny mentally. Super Lead's awesome, but it's just a thing, like if you bring it to a gig, I have to bring like a power station. If I want to run effects, I can't, there's no effects loop. That's all those things, and the less I want to bring. So I've looked at Friedman's in the past, and I thought they were cool. I had a Dirty Shirley many years ago, which I thought sounded great, but it didn't have enough headroom for me on gigs. So I remember playing a few gigs, and I just got kind of buried. So I ended up getting rid of it. It's a great sounding amp, but it didn't cover enough territory for me. And I've tried the Brown Eye, and look, I got to be honest, the names that he gives these amps, it was part of the annoyance for me. I got to be honest. So, and some of those were too kind of refined, if that makes sense. They were a little more compressed. I think they're not for me as a player who really likes those sort of raw Marshall sounds, 70s sort of things. And so I know he's got a great effects loop. And so I was looking at the Jakey Lee 20 watt, which I thought sounded really cool. And then they releasing that, coming out with a 50. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to hang out for that. So it's got a really nice effects loop, and I was just playing it. So this is there's 2 channels, and there's a boost on one side. There's a few switches and bright switches and stuff. So right here, I'm on, we call it, the plexi channel. No, here's the, sorry. A lot of tune there. Hold on. New strings. Yeah. So there's a plexi channel, and there's a like an 800. So it's a bit of like a 800, Marshall 800, which I grew up playing and love those. So here's the plexi side. Sounds like a Marshall. So I can boost it, say with like the Jan Ray. And then it gets a really nice clean sound. Ooh, going on with the tuning today. These had new strings. So clean sound at this volume is hard to get through an aux without me adjusting the mic volume. So. And then we got the higher gain side, like the 800. And at the beginning of the video, when I was playing, I was just using exactly that 800 sound, or the boosted side, and rolled back my volume a bit. Then I can step on a boost. So I have to pull for the boost on that. I don't know. So it does all the things that I love my two rocks. This just doesn't sound like a two rock, and two rocks don't sound like a Friedman. So I wanted a master volume, more modern, appointed Marshall sort of sound with Dave's build quality with a really high end effects loop. So the effects loop is buffered, and I'm not using the effects loop right now, but I have the Del verb in it, and it just sounds great. So I'm really psyched about the amp. It's kind of the amp I had wanted for a while. And honestly, when I was playing all those rock records and rock bands when I was younger, this was the amp that I would want. That's kind of funny. I've discovered, I'm like, wow, why didn't they make this ages ago? So just for fun, let's hear it with a humbucker with Les Paul. These are low output pickups, but you can get the idea of the amp. So now if I crank up all this, the tone and everything, so a bit more like a plexi. So it's pretty cool. Bring that volume. Oops. So that's really pushing the amp really hard too. So it does that plexi thing. I'm cranking all the tone and volume, the bass and treble. And let's try the gain chime. That was me boosting the front, and let's try the higher gain channel. So you gotta get the idea. What I really like about it's not a metal amp, it's a rock amp. And so I don't like the, as my friend calls it, the chunk chunk kind of sounds, like chunk chunk chunk. That's not my thing. So it's just like a modded Marshall. Pretty cool. So there it is. So I love the 50 watt, really great. I didn't want the 100 one, it was really expensive. I don't want another 100 watt amp. So the 50 to me is a smaller box. It's kind of bright in the red. You guys like the red? I was thinking about making the black shell case, you know, so it's got this red thing sticking out. But I'm really enjoying it. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Well, we're kind of right here. Are you going to do another boot camp course? Like a follow-up or redo another one? Okay, well, the question was, I have a guitar boot camp, and I usually launch it. I'm going to launch the original one again, because people have been asking, in January. People seem to like kind of a bit like a New Year's resolution. So the guitar boot camp is an 8-week long boot camp, and we meet a few times during that, and you have lessons that build up, and it's a lot of info, but we'll be doing that again in January. I haven't done a boot camp follow-up too, just because I've been kind of busy. I'm trying to figure it out. A lot of the courses sort of turn out to be a lot of the same thing, you know, like not the same thing, but some of the courses would double over to boot camp. So I got to figure out how I'd want to do boot camp part 2. Because when I made boot camp for part 1, I really loaded it down with stuff. And a lot of people are like, wow, this is like a lot of stuff. Probably more than you can actually really do. Not probably, definitely more than you can do in 8 weeks. So just to let you know. You know, Jeff, have you had a chance to try the new Two-Rock Bloomfield Drive plugin? Yes, I did want to bring that up. It's great. I haven't had a chance to really run through it. I just got it yesterday, and it sounds really good. Just so Two-Rock, so everyone knows, Two-Rock released a plugin, of the Bloomfield Drive, which has actually been my favorite Two-Rock. As you guys know, I use it all the time. It's my main amp. And they released a plugin for that, for your computer, obviously. And it's like on sale right now for $129 or something. I thought it was really, really great. I thought it was really nice. In the half hour I spent with it, I'm like, oh yeah, tons of promise in this, but I had a bunch of other things I had to do. So I haven't had a chance to sit down with it yet. Okay. Yeah, the workshop in England, I believe is full. The Guitar Breaks that I'm going to be there 22nd to 24th. I believe that's full. I'm going to that pedal show next Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be in London for a few days, and I go out to those guys. So that's going to be a ton of fun. I'm going to bring the big pedal board, I think, which is going to be fun to travel with. But I'm glad to be on it, and I'm looking forward to it. I've been in contact with those guys for a long time. I've met Mick and Dan at NAMM a few years ago. And, you know, great guys, obviously. You know, I love those guys. So I'm looking forward to it as well. Do I ever play Chicago? Not really, no. The problem is, and people ask this all the time, it's like, you know, why don't you tour more? It's strictly finances. It just doesn't pay. Like if there's a gig that people are like, oh, you know, we'll pay you X amount of dollars, but the States is a very big place, and to get to Chicago is a long drive from New York City. I know you guys know that from the States. And it's just a matter of the money. That's really it. So it's nice to want to go play gigs, but if financially, if you can't really make it, if you can't make it work, which I can't because I got to pay the guys and all that stuff. So I would like to, but I am starting to work with the singer, and we're talking about doing a record, and she's been doing a lot of stuff in Europe especially, so I'm looking forward to that project that I'm working on, which I'll keep quiet until there's something to talk about. But we're working on some tunes and probably a record. So it'll be a vocal record, like a blues rock record with a female singer. And it's going really well. So we're looking forward to it. And she's like, well, I'm going to do a tour. Could you do a tour? I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe. She's like, well, it's 3 months long. I'm like, no, I can't do a 3-month tour. No, I can't do that. What exactly is the Bloomfield? Fender or Marshall? Question mark. The Bloomfield Drive mine is a 6V6, is the 40 watt version. And I went for the lower wattage so I can turn the amp up a bit more. Eli and I had discussed that, so I went for the 40 watt. I have the 100 watt classic reverb signature when I need the Beast or the Super Lead if I need that kind of volume. I would have to say I think the reason why it's my favorite Two-Rock that I've played is it's the most rock. You can make it sound like a rock amp, which I really love. And the TS1, the whole Dumble thing, which I really love too, is it's a harder amp. If you ever played a TS1 or a Dumble or like a really great clone, you got to be on your game when you're playing those. And I like that, yes, of course, but I also have a lot of legato and shreddy background. So this feels a bit more Marshall-y in that sense, like this kind of thing. So I love the TS1 and I'd love to have one and all that, but that's a little softer, a little more forgiving, and I kind of like that for the way I play with the legato and stuff like that. So I'm not always pushing the amp. The great clean sound on it, so it's a bit dumbly. How's that? It's like a softer Dumble. I prefer it to the classic reverb signature. By far, I love the classic reverb signature. It's great, but for me, it's the Bloomfield Drive. I love that amp. It's spectacular. So try the plug-in. I think it might give you a good idea. I don't know. I haven't spent that much time with it, but I've done gigs with the Bloomfield, of course, and people are like, that just sounds amazing. I'm like, yep, it's totally happy with that amp too. Yes, Jeff, you will be doing that pedal show. Yes, that's the plan. I am, barring something not happening, yes, I'm doing that pedal show. Thanks to those guys. Any more news in the Germany gigs next year? We've started sending some stuff out. We haven't heard back from too many people yet because I think the main connection that Walter has in Germany are more jazz people. But I'm hooked up with a booking agent talking in the new year about Italy, and he's got connections in other countries. So while we're there, hopefully, that would be great. I would like that. What else do we have? Any other questions? Any more plans with stuff with Matt? Yeah. We're just trying to find the dates to do it. I just talked to him earlier today. I was like, where should I stay in London when I go to London? But we're trying to get some other dates at the bitter end. It's just scheduling. He's in Florida, and then I'm like, oh, he's in town. These guys, they don't have anything available, so we got to set it out. Since Matt lives in Florida, he's got to come up to do the gigs. So a lot of times, his girlfriend Christine is originally from here, so we try to work out something when we know he's going to be in town, or tacking on some other trip that he's got. I am trying, and it will probably happen sooner or later, to get David Grissom to come up, and we're going to do a gig together. So I'm looking forward to that. I was talking to him about that. Once again, it's just to get him up here, but it's hard to say to your wife, like, yeah, we're going to go up to New York and go on vacation. I'm going to play a gig or two. Doesn't work that way. So, all right. Any other questions, guys? All right. So just to recap, I do have my course on sale. 75% off. Playing the changes, blues in one position, $10, something like that. Go deep into what I talked about earlier in the course. I think you would dig it. Jeff Ford, have you ever tried a PRS Fiore? It has a 2.5 scale length, vintage feel neck, and great balanced output, moving between single coil and bridge humbucker. Yeah, I've played the guitar, and it's Lettieri's guitar. I've played it. I thought it was cool. It didn't. I love PRSs. I think they're great. I just didn't. It didn't speak to me. Something about maybe the aesthetics. I wanted a pick guard on or something like that. So I didn't end up picking one up. But every PRS I play, it's a great guitar. I've got a Studio and I've got the Grissom, and they're both amazing. So I can't. They make great stuff. All right. Grab the course. Kenneth D., thank you so much. All right, guys. So once again, if you're interested in a Tuttle Jeff McErlane signature guitar, you can reach out to Eddie at soundpure.com. Talk to him, and he'll get your order going. We talked about the price and all that kind of stuff. I'm totally behind it. I'm just, I've been approached by other people to do some stuff, and it hasn't been my thing, And people, and vendors not knocking on my door. And also the problem with working with some of the bigger companies like that is they don't want you to play anything else. And they also, you get lost in the shuffle. And since I know the quality of guitar that Michael makes, because I've got a few and I've known him for 20 years, I'm completely confident in the guitar, that if you get the guitar, you'll be psyched. That's the most important thing to me. And and I've been over the moon about the guitar. So I'm super psyched. And honestly, I haven't been playing my vintage Strat much at all. I've just been playing that because it's such a joy. Also, there will be a Nashville Telecaster Jeff McElrain guitar coming out too in the Shoreline Gold with a maple neck. So some people want maple necks or tellies and stuff. So it's going to be the same specs: 7 1/4, 6105s, 860 neck, or maybe 830 if you want that. And yeah, going to do a run of those, and hopefully you guys will be interested in checking those out. Any recommended venue in Austin? Traveling? I really don't know much about Austin. I mean, there's the standard ones, but David Grissom plays the Saxon Pub on Thursdays or Wednesdays. Look that up at 6 p.m. It's an early gig. Go see that. He's one of my favorite guitar players ever. Just amazing. Definitely go see him play. I think there's stuff like Antones and stuff. Those are a bit more touristy, which still may be very good. But the Saxon Pub, he plays there. And I forget his name. I've forgotten. The guy who plays guitar in Eric Johnson's band plays there quite a bit, and he's pretty amazing. And if Carter Arrington, who also lives in London, but he also lives sometimes in Austin, I would, if he's playing, definitely go check him out too. Yeah. One last question from Jason Carter. Do you have any further on the idea of monthly subscription for your website? Yes, that is in the works. It just, things have just been really busy in a great way. And thanks to everybody who's buying the courses. And so it takes time to put together the courses and the master classes and the workshops and things like that. And so in the new year, I am planning a subscription model. Now, a lot of guys give all their courses part of the subscription. I'm not going to do that because I like to keep the courses separate because it's working well for my business. Okay, what else can I say? So I'm going to give something I think of equal value, which I think is really cool. And that would be working through tunes or working through things throughout the month. So you'd have 4 lessons across the month. So it's like taking a private lesson and a goal of working on a tune or getting your theory together. So each month we'd rotate through 3 different topics. One would be repertoire, the other would be vocabulary, and the third one would be fingerboard knowledge and technique. So alternating months, and you can go back and go and forth, and you can jump around. And that's sort of what I end up doing in the blues master, the blues boot camp. For any of you guys who have taken that, the same kind of concept. So that's the way I teach. So, the three pillars. You need to know tunes. You need to know play tunes. You need to understand the fingerboard theoretically, and you need to have vocabulary, like soloing vocabulary, building up all those things. So once I get the time and hopefully get a chance to get that together, because I want to do it well. I don't want to just bang out some stuff, and I hope you guys know that I try to keep the quality really high. So it would be like the Blues Boot Camp kind of thing, but on a monthly thing, and it would be pretty inexpensive. Okay. Well, guys, thanks so much. So you're not going to see me live for 2 weeks because I'm going to be in England, and then I get back, and then I have to head out of town for Thanksgiving. So I will see you guys live in December. Oh, and earlier today I interviewed, I think this will be fun. It was a great woman who I found online for hand care. Like I've said, I've got some hand issues, and every once in a while they kind of bug me. And I've been doing a lot of exercises, keeping my hands together. That's putty, squeeze, and all this stuff. And she has a lot of great videos. They're called Virtual Hand Care. And her videos are awesome, and I did them on the road. And so I interviewed her, and I'm going to do a video on how to keep hand pain away as a guitar player, especially as you get kind of older or at any age, things to do to ward off any kind of injury. And then if you have some stuff going on, ways to work through it. And I think she's great. So we just did that today. So I'm going to try to get that out for the weekend. Probably won't be a big watch because it doesn't say why you stink on guitar. It's 3 tips to avoid hand pain for guitar players. And it's good. She's really good. And the info is great. And I've watched her videos for a while. So I just emailed her and she was happy to do it. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. I think I think every musician should do. It's very simple stuff. And I just did it today and everything felt kind of nice, All right, guys, I will see all you in a few weeks. And BV, thanks so much as always. And please hit the like and subscribe button. If you're not subscribed, please hit the like button. People, it really helps the algorithm. And man, the algorithm it's a bitch. All right. You guys are the best. I will see you all in a few weeks. Take it easy. Bye-bye.